That's going. Okay, so welcome. Today we're talking mourning doves. We're talking mourning dove hunting. We've got a very special guest today. Our guest is Mr. Mark Zschoche. Mark is a board member for the Minnesota chapter of Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. He's originally from Kansas, so he's a transplant, much like myself, where he grew up hunting and fishing. He really enjoys hunting big game, upland birds, turkey, and waterfowl. And his favorite hunting activity is following his two German wire-haired pointers in the field every fall. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Mark. Mark's going to get us started on our presentation. We're going to be talking mourning doves, how you hunt them, what you need to know, where you need to go, and we're going to be taking your questions and answers at the end. So please direct all of your Q&A, your questions into the Q&A because it's easier for us to navigate, and we'll get rolling. So Mark, please take it away and tell us about mourning dove hunting.
Okay, there you go. Can you see my screen there, James?
We got it.
All right, great. So thank you, James, for the introduction. As James mentioned, I'm a board member for the Minnesota chapter of Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, which is a nonprofit organization that advocates for our public lands and waters and maintaining access for all to go out and enjoy those public lands and waters. So we'll jump right into this introduction to dove hunting. I grew up doing quite a bit of this in Kansas, and then as my career has moved me around the country, it's something I've always enjoyed doing, just because it is kind of that kickoff to the fall hunting season. So, James, do you want to touch on these first couple slides?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're just gonna really quickly, this is the Outdoor Skills and Stewardship Series. We've been doing, this is our 21st week doing it. We're gonna continue doing it. And we're gonna be talking about doves and dove hunting. And Mark, if you wanna go to the next one. Right here, I wanna direct everybody's attention, our upcoming talks. Next week, we're gonna have a live broadcast. Our intention is to have a live broadcast if the technology works out for us from the Minnesota State Fair. Our coworkers, Jeff Letterman, Benji Cohn, and some others are going to be poking around at the state fair. So we're going to be talking all about what's happening with the DNR at the state fair for 2021. And then September 1st, that starts our new fall series. So we're going to be sending out a new registration link for the fall series. And coming up, hunting is coming up. Hunting is here on September 1st with the doves, but the first few talks for the fall series, it's going to be talking about our expanded deer season opportunities. How do you get started in small game hunting? How do you get around with transporting and traveling with firearms in the state and between states? Towards the end of the month, we're going to have our waterfowl hunting basics class webinar, and then we're going to talk about a little bit of fall fishing. So we've got a lot of great stuff coming up. We're really excited about it. And we're going to be getting that registration link distributed near and far very soon.
All right. So again, my name is Mark Zschoche, board member of Minnesota chapter of Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. This is a picture of myself after me and some friends had a successful dove hunt. So, and there we all are. So, why to go dove hunting? As James mentioned, it's the first hunting season that really kicks off in the fall. It opens September 1st. So for most states across the country, especially in the Midwest, it is the first hunting season that opens. It's also a great introductory hunt into wing shooting to get started with bird hunting, and there's really minimal gear and equipment that's required to get started, and especially if you have a friend or know somebody who may already have some of that gear. It's also a fun hunt to do with a group. You can spread out a little bit, cover more ground, and really just a good way to build camaraderie out in the field. So start with a little bit of information about doves themselves. They're a native migratory bird. They can be found from the East Coast to the West Coast, all across North America. They do migrate from up in Canada and the northern states down to Mexico to winter. Every year they start that migration once the temperatures start dropping and cools. I've found that once the lows get into um, the lower 40s and especially in the upper 30s, you'll definitely notice a reduction in the number of doves we see around here in other states. So doves are they're a bluish gray to brownish color, almost iridescent in a way. So really depending on the lighting, um, depends on kind of how you'll see them. And up close and far away, they'll look a little bit different as well. They're about the size of a robin, except they have longer and more pointed tail feathers. It's really important to be able to learn how to identify doves, especially when they're flying, because they can look really similar to other protected bird species like the killdeer and the kestrel. This is especially true first thing in the morning, right as the sun's coming up. It's low light conditions, so you want to maybe go out now and take a look around and see doves flying around, kind of learn how they, their wing beat pattern and how they're moving around when they're flying.
And Mark, just to kind of build off of that, these things are moving fast, right? They're going 40, 50 miles an hour when they're booking it. And so, you catch that movement out of the corner of your eye. And I know when I'm bird hunting, I frequently see what I want to see. And you got to take that extra moment to be like, okay, yes, that is a mourning dove, because they're hauling when they're coming in.
Yeah, they are. And, a lot of people to that point call them gray missiles for that reason. So they are, one of the faster flying bird species, especially because they're already flying in towards you, typically when you're hunting. Um, so, so doves can be found for the most part throughout the state of Minnesota. The only exception may be the very far northeast portion of Minnesota. Um, there's probably still some doves in that region. However, they're just going to be fairly sparse. Their feeding habits tend to be, in the field first thing in the morning, right after the sunrise, as well as later in the evening too. They feed on the ground, and that their diet can consist of seeds, fruits, insects, and in more agricultural areas, small grains like sunflower, wheat, barley, and oats. They really love sunflowers. If you can find a field or food plot with sunflowers in it, they will congregate to that before anything else I've found. So a little bit about the license requirements and regulations that are needed for getting out and going dove hunting. With as with most hunting types, you'll want to complete your hunter education firearm safety course. However, there is a great program in Minnesota with the apprentice hunter validation, where someone who is new to hunting, wanting to get into it and experience it for the first time, can get that apprentice hunter validation and go out with a licensed hunter um, just to see if it's something they enjoy, they like, before committing to taking the hunter education firearm safety course. So,
and
um,
and that is something, there shouldn't be any reason to keep anybody out of the woods or waters or the fields this fall. If you are looking for your firearm safety, if you are 14 and above, you can do a completely online firearm safety. That's about 14 to 16 hours worth of content. I would not save it for the night before you want to go out hunting, but because you're going to need it to buy your license and you'd be pulling an all-nighter. But that's an option. If you are 10, 10 or 11, you know, as long as you're directly next to the person you're hunting with, you don't need firearm safety. And if you're 11 or 12, you can get by with the apprentice hunter validation if you don't have the time to get into the firearm safety. So, you know, there's a lot of options for folks to get out. And if you're a first time hunter or just hunting curious, that apprentice hunter validation is a great tool to get out.
And then if you do have completed hunter's education already, it's just this small game license that is needed for hunting mourning doves, as well as completing the HIP certification, which is the Harvest Information Program. And it's really a survey that helps the DNR wildlife biologists, as well as the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services understand how much harvest of migratory birds is occurring each year. So it's typically it takes a few minutes to complete, just a few questions on if you hunted certain species the previous year, and if so, how many were taken. So some states it's a nominal fee. They call it a HIP stamp as well. And it's required for all migratory birds. But with mourning doves, that's the only certification or stamp that's required, whereas ducks and geese require additional stamps. So legal shooting hours for mourning doves are from a half hour before sunrise to sunset. And sunset's pretty common for most bird species because this allows them time to go to the roost and get settled in before it's completely dark. One restriction with migratory bird species specifically is that a shotgun can hold no more than 3 shells. So for side-by-side shotguns or over-under shotguns, which have 2 barrels, they are perfectly fine. Nothing has to be done to those. For semi-auto shotguns and pumps, pump action shotguns, a magazine plug is required, and that's really just an extended stick, if you will, or usually a plastic piece anymore, that goes in the end of the magazine tube to reduce the capacity of that magazine tube, typically from 4 shells to 2 shells, and then you have 1 in the chamber. So that would be your 3 shell maximum capacity.
And in a pinch, I mean, they make magazine plugs. You can go to the store and buy them. If you get out into the field and you realize you forgot it at home, I've used broken pencils before, or even like Mark said, picking a stick up off the ground and just breaking it to about the approximate length of a shell, because most pumps are only going to be able to hold 4 shells anyway. So they just want to take that one away and get it in your magazine, and you can have a temporary magazine plug.
Yep. Yep. I've certainly been in the field with friends when that situation came up pre-sunrise, and they were scrambling to find a good stick to make that last minute modification. So it's something that can happen to new hunters and experienced hunters, but make sure you're aware of it. Me personally, I leave my plug in my shotgun all year round because I don't necessarily feel like I need the extra shell capacity, and I don't want to go from pheasant hunting to duck hunting or dove hunting and forget to put that plug back in. So season information for doves, as I mentioned, it opens September 1st, and here in Minnesota, it runs all the way through November 29th. Some states are different. Some states have a break, but this Minnesota. You'll find that September 1st is pretty common across the majority of states that have dove seasons. I believe there's only maybe 1 or 2 states that don't have a mourning dove season. So it's a great opportunity, no matter where you're at, to get out in the field. As I mentioned, shooting hours, half hour before sunrise to sunset. And the bag limits, your daily limit for number of birds that you can take in a day is 15. And then your possession limit is 3 days bag limit. So that'd be 45. So that's anything in your possession would count towards that 45. Where to hunt? Minnesota has a lot of opportunities that are open to the public for recreational access. Wildlife management areas, these can be found throughout the state. There's quite a few around the Twin Cities area. Also, there's a walk-in access program, which is private landowners opening up their land for the public to access to hunt. And these can also be found throughout the state. Waterfowl production areas are another place to look, as well as wildlife refuges. Please note that with waterfowl production areas and wildlife refuges, non-toxic or non-lead shot is required when hunting those areas. You can't even have lead shot in your possession on you while you're hunting there. And then if you know a private landowner, who has maybe some acreage where they farm, that's certainly a great place to try to get permission to hunt. So a resource to find all these different areas to go hunting would be the DNR Recreation Compass that's on their website. Here you can zoom in, and really find those areas of a specific place you want to maybe look for and get out to. You can see there's quite a few just here south of St. Paul, north side, and going out west. So the legend can tell you what all those areas are, and then you can click on each one as you're drilling into those and learn more about them.
And just to be clear, like when we're talking about the different areas that are out there, the wildlife management areas, specifically the walk-in access site that requires an additional license to get access to that. So it's a $5 contribution so that you can gain access to those sites. But it's a tremendous resource and a great way to gain access to what would otherwise be private lands that would be inaccessible, but the landowners are working with the DNR to allow certain activities to occur. So it's a great program.
Yep, I agree. So we'll get into the gear and equipment that's used for dove hunting now. Shotgun, as I mentioned, that cannot hold more than 3 shells. So that magazine plug would just go here in the end of the magazine tube that's underneath the barrel on pump action and semi-automatic shotguns. Gauge, doves can be hunted because they're a smaller bird. They can be hunted with anything from a 410 shotgun, which is the smallest shotgun that's out there, all the way up to a 12 gauge with lighter loads. So typically you'll find people dove hunting with a 20 gauge shotgun, but really if you're wanting to get out there and only have access to 12 gauge, don't let that hold you back. And then the choke, which is basically there's a small tube that threads into the end of the shotgun barrel. Doves are typically hunted with more open chokes, so the pattern spreads out fairly wide. Because they are smaller birds, they're not as hardy as a pheasant may be. It doesn't take a lot of shot to take them down. And we're also using smaller shot size, so in the 7 to 8 range for doves. As a non-toxic shot is not required, with the exception of the waterfowl production areas and wildlife refuges that I mentioned before. So just make sure you check where you're going and the requirements there. So Decoys are great to have when dove hunting because doves do tend to want to be a little more gregarious, and they'll see other doves feeding in the field. They'll want to fly down, join them. Uh, here's a picture of some just plastic decoy shells that are more stationary. Um, this would also be one that I use quite a bit. And it has a clip on the bottom of it that can clip onto a branch. I also like these decoys because that clip can pull out. And what I will do a lot of times, first thing in the morning when I'm hunting a field where there may be feeding, is I'll take a wooden dowel and cut it down and stick this into the field so they're slightly above any stubble or anything else that may block the view of the decoy to incoming doves, but just raises them up a little bit. Motorized and motion decoys for doves are legal to use in Minnesota and can be used. So this is one here, and it has batteries in the back and has a switch on it, and so the wings will spin, and just that added motion really can help attract and pull in other doves that are flying around. They're able to see it from a further distance, and it really helps draw them in. A seed or bucket, dove hunting is done from a stationary position. So you're usually setting up in a spot over a feeding area or a watering area where they're going to be doves would be coming in to congregate. So having that cedar bucket is really nice to have. Clothing, camo is helpful. It's by no means absolutely necessary to have. I've gone out plenty of times in just a pair of jeans or another pair of pants with a lightweight camo shirt and camo hat. So other items to think about are earplugs. Typically dove hunting, if you're hunting with others, you're somewhat close to each other, but maybe spread out, at least 10, 20 yards. Bug spray, because the bugs will still be out, and especially ticks. Make sure to be aware of that. Sunscreen too, because it'll be warm out there. The sun will be getting up there. And then also for that reason, make sure to take plenty of water, maybe some snacks, but so otherwise just go out there and enjoy watching the sun come up and then all the birds start moving around first thing in the morning. So it can be really key to scout areas before the season starts with doves. They're typically, once they're feeding in a field, they'll go back there multiple days in a row because they know there's feed there, especially if they're roosting nearby, have a water source nearby. Doves are usually most active first thing in the morning. They'll leave the roost tree and fly to the field where they're going to feed. Before then, they'll go and get some grit or little rocks for their gizzard to help digest that food. So the main areas to set up for dove hunting, first thing in the morning would be near feeding areas. This can be over a grain field, a cut hay field, because cutting that hay field exposes seeds and insects that the doves will go after to eat. And also if you can identify some of their flight paths, where they're roosting and then flying to feed and then maybe flying back to the roost to loaf for a little bit. Those can be great areas just to catch them as they transition from one spot to another. Doves can tend to follow tree lines, just as on their flight path. Say back here in this picture, that little fence and tree line there, they can sometimes tend to follow that. So that's something you may notice as as you're out scouting. Other areas to set up would be near ponds and water. That can be a really good place in late afternoon, evening, especially this year because as many of you are aware, it's been exceptionally dry. And so those watering sources are fairly limited this year. So there's a potential to concentrate doves, going to um, the same water source. And also near roosting areas. It's going to be late in the morning or evening. This is a good example of where doves may like to roost. Typically, a tree that maybe one branch has died on it, and so there's not many leaves or any leaves on it. They like to sit up in those types of trees.
Now, Mark, that's these aren't deep forest birds, right? They're not really good.
Right.
I mean, like we said earlier, they're going fast. They're booking it, and so the trade-off there is that their speed is one thing, their maneuverability isn't quite the same. So they're going to be following those tree edges. They're going to be perched in areas where they can take a quick takeoff flight if they need to. They're not going to be buried in the woods because that's not how they're designed. So they really gravitate towards those more open areas because that speed is really their best defense mechanism.
Yep, absolutely, good point. And if you are walking along a field edge or um, through a potential feeding area, and you hear a bird flush and you're not sure if it was a dove, they have a fairly distinct kind of whistling that their wings make as they take off. So you can usually pick that up after you've heard it once or twice. So where to set up or how to set up? You want to set up with some brush behind you so it breaks up your outline. There's usually some shadows in there. So it's harder for the doves to see you and pick you out as a potential threat. Also, it's preferable to set up with the sun at your back so that you're not, as uh, doves and other birds are flying around out in front of you, you're not staring at the sun, squinting, trying to determine, is that a dove? Is it not? I'm not sure. It also, with that sun at your back, creates more shadows. So you're a little more hidden, but then now you've kind of flipped it where the birds are looking into the sun, so it's harder for them to pick you out of the brush. Dogs can be used for dove hunting. By no means are they necessary. I have 2 bird dogs, and I have yet to ever take them out dove hunting, just because usually it's pretty warm and hot for them. And not all dogs really like doves because their feathers are small, they fall out easily. Dogs don't like that in their mouth, especially when it's warm out. But dogs can certainly be used to retrieve and help find down birds. Just be aware of the heat and the ticks. Take plenty of water for the dogs. And if you're not using a dog, if you do knock a dove down, just be sure to really watch where it goes down and go straight to that area. Don't take your eyes off it because they can blend in really well, even in an open field that may just be bare dirt and a little bit of grass here and there. It's amazing how well they can blend in once they're down on the ground and not moving. So,
Yeah, my first job out of college was working as on a research project that looked at mourning doves and looking at hunted areas versus not hunting areas. And one of the hunters was really bummed because he said he just lost his best retriever. And I said, "Oh, I'm sorry you lost your dog." He's like, "No, my son turned 10 and now he actually hunts. I used to just like have him park next to me and he'd run out there and grab him and come back. And now I got to walk out there on my own because he's too busy shooting." So
yeah. And one last thing, with dove hunting, at times the shooting can be fast, furious, and a lot of fun. But please just be sure to pick up empty shells that are around you when you're done hunting. Nobody wants to go out to, a public field if they're just walking around or also hunting and see empty shells that have been left behind by someone else. So cleaning and preparing doves, they're pretty easy to clean. Doves may be transported fully dressed, meaning with all their feathers removed, their wing, foot, head, everything can be removed, and you could just have the actual breast on the rib cage still there. They're easy enough to identify for a game warden to know that that is a dove in your possession. So, but if you are cleaning birds on the field, take a bucket or a trash bag with you. Don't just leave everything out there in the field. And so a couple different cleaning methods would be plucking or skinning. Plucking is pretty self-explanatory. You're just taking the bird and say, this is a bird, and just slowly plucking all the feathers off and leaving the skin attached. It is a little tedious, but it's very delicious. And depending on the method you're going to use to cook it, you may prefer to pluck it over skinning it. Skinning can be done pretty easily, and with doves, because they do have fairly thin skin, a lot of times you can just take your thumbs right here on the breast and pull it apart. It'll separate that skin on their breast, and then you can peel it all off, and then use a small pair of kitchen shears and take their wings, feet, and head off. So they're pretty easy to clean.
And this is another reason why it's so great to hunt in a group. I mean, first of all, it's fun to go out with your friends and have a good time. Second of all, you can see in that picture, one dove is not gonna make much of a meal. And so when you get more folks together and you get more doves, you know, even if everybody only gets a handful, you know, you wind up being able to have enough to get some appetizers and to get a decent amount of harvest. But yeah, I don't know anybody who's going to get fat off of one dove.
No, no, not at all. So, um, so a couple examples of some popular recipes for doves. I would say uh, by far jalapeno poppers tend to be the biggest one. Not sure why that is. Maybe it's just fairly simple, easy, straightforward. But here you're basically taking a half of a jalapeno, remove the seeds, and putting some cream cheese or um, regular cheese in there, and then one breast from the dove, one, I guess, lobe side of the breast you could put on there, wrap in bacon, grill it. Great appetizer. So maybe if you didn't have a huge harvest and take, you know, you grill up some jalapeno poppers for a little appetizer to share with friends. So tacos are also really popular. Enchiladas. I've grilled them whole with a little bit of barbecue sauce. Kebabs. I've done stir fry. You can fry them, roasted, shown up here with the skin on. That's one preparation where you'd want to leave the skin on, just so the meat doesn't dry out in the oven when it's in there. So questions.
All right. Yeah. Thank you so much for that, Mark. And yeah, if you could
Absolutely.
just go back to that food picture really quick,
Yeah,
because I'm always thinking with my stomach. But the poppers they're phenomenal way to do it, and because the breasts, they just slide right into the jalapenos. I mean, it's like just stuff in an envelope, and then you wrap it with bacon, and you know, bacon and jalapenos and doves, because the meat itself is a really nice dark meat, right? Like
yep,
it's not quite as rich as duck,
right,
but it's a really, you know, it's not the kind of same breast meat texture or flavor that you get with chicken or turkey. So it's a really delicious protein source, and yeah, just You know, and I've done the poppers without the jalapenos, uh, to just like, you know, just bacon wrapped dove breasts on the grill. They're a great little appetizer. So let's go ahead and turn off the presentation, Mark, and then we're going to get
Okay.
into some questions and answer, some Q&A, some time to talk with folks that are on. I think you clarified the HIP certification question that we had come in. And just to be abundantly clear, you do not need a migratory waterfowl stamp to go dove hunting,
Correct.
right?
Yep.
And you should get that HIP certification when you get your license. You know, when you're filling out, when you're applying for your small game license, they should ask you, are you going to be hunting any migratory birds? Because that's relevant for waterfowl, it's relevant for woodcock, it's relevant for doves. If they don't ask you that, make sure you tell them. Say, I will be hunting migratory birds. I need to get my HIP certification. You will get a receipt for that HIP certification. Make sure you keep it with you with your license, because if a conservation officer comes along and asks to see your license, they're going to be looking for that HIP certification as well. So make sure you've got that tucked in and with you. So one question that came up that we haven't touched on yet is any blaze orange or pink required?
Only if there's an open firearm season for deer and you're out dove hunting. So that would be
Excellent.
the only time that you would need to wear orange out dove hunting. So
Okay. Do you find you know, if you're on a public area, because doves are going to see that orange. Doves can
yeah,
see in color. They're going to see that orange. The potential there is that they could see your blaze and get spooked. But also the trade-off there is if I'm hunting on a public parcel and I'm not necessarily sure who else is out there, I might throw on a blaze cap or a camo blaze cap just so that there's a little bit of blaze that folks can see. Do you ever do that, or are you pretty much all camo all the time?
walking in and out from the vehicle, I may, and I do the same thing turkey hunting. Let's say
Hmm.
just to so you have that higher visibility piece of clothing on you. Um, but other than that, usually I don't. After I'm set up, I'm usually wearing all camo. So
Nice, nice.
it's always
How
good to, if you're already set up and you hear someone else walking in, just have your headlamp if you have one, or just say, "Hey, we're over here," and just so they're aware and they'll say, "Okay, thanks." We'll kind of move on, and so find
Yeah,
another spot that's a safe distance away. So
yeah. So when you're out there, so if I wanted to prep for dove season, you know, I've got a couple of weeks left. Um, is you know the standard logic is that, you know, I would practice trap shooting for pheasants. I would practice skeet for ducks. Is there or one of those better than the other to practice for doves, or should I just like go crazy and go sporting clays because they're just coming from all directions?
yeah, I like sporting clays personally. Um, so just because it does give you all the variables of crossing shots coming in over your head, coming at you. So um, yeah, doves can have somewhat of a erratic flight. So um, I'd say sporting clays it would be good. So
Okay. So we got a question on here. Can you walk through the process to identify potential lands to hunt? How would you start online? And then what would you look for when you put boots on the ground? What are some of the characteristics that you're queuing in on? So like I know when I'm digitally scouting deer, I'm looking for pinch points, I'm looking for funnels, I'm looking for a mix of bedding and feeding areas. Like when you're looking for potential dove areas online, what are the characteristics that you're looking for?
I'd start with identifying um, some WMAs or WPAs or walk-in areas that would either already have some kind of grain or seed planted on them, or that are close to an agricultural field where those doves may be feeding. So then you can catch them either in that transition period going out to feed or coming back. Preferably something with maybe some roost trees on it if there's not a feeding area specifically on that piece. Or maybe you see there's a small pond on that area with a couple trees close by or a tree line nearby. That'd be one area to key in on. And then getting boots on the ground, you'll be able to go out and see, okay, has that field been harvested yet? Even if it's not on the WMA, or if there's a hay field that's recently been mowed and baled, that could be a good area. So that's usually what I'm looking for. Those roosting trees, it's usually one of a taller tree, but you can tell it has died, no leaves on it, bare open branches for them to fly into and land. So
Nice. And it's always if you have questions, especially if you're looking at public lands like WMAs, call up the wildlife manager of those areas and say, hey, what, do you all have any food plots planted? What's out there? These are folks who are out there managing the lands. They know what's going on. So if you see something that looks dovey, you can reach out and call folks, and that's for any species that you're looking for, and just say, hey, this is what I'm seeing. What do y'all know on the ground? And if they say, yeah, we see X, Y, and Z in this area, then maybe it saves you a drive from just looking on the computer screen to making a however many minutes or hours drive to go check it out. So
right, and that can be true this year too with potential water sources because even though a satellite image may show that there's a little pond on one spot, it could be dry this year. So
yeah, that's definitely for sure. Really quick, let's talk a little bit about ammo. We're coming up on 12:45. I've got a couple of questions about ammo. One, I'm not me personally, I don't like to use lead when I hunt. What would be so my options are basically steel or like for waterfowl or bismuth. Those are kind of the big alternatives that are out there. What kind of shot size would you recommend if I was going to go with steel?
steel, I would recommend in that 7, maybe 6s, sometimes 7. Steel shot can be a little bit more tricky to find, but 6 shot would be fine. For doves, because there's usually quite a bit of shooting, and they are moving so fast, they can be difficult to hit. Don't buy more expensive lead ammunition because it's not necessary. Doves are thin skin. They're not like a duck who has really thick skin. So steel is perfectly fine for them. But so,
Nice. So look for sevens. And I know it's a
yeah,
terrible year to be looking for any
yeah.
ammo, but I'll set up some alerts and see what I can find. And then the other is these are really fast moving birds. Sometimes they can be a little farther away. I mean, like what kind of range are you looking at? And are there times where you go with higher power shells if it's like a really windy day, or if they're just not coming in? So like what's your ideal range of a shot, and what's like your max range of a shot?
I mean, ideally, you'd want them in that 20, 30 yard range. They can't maybe a little bit further. Usually, I I don't use, I would say, like more powerful shells because inevitably you'd end up with doves coming in close and then you might be destroying the birds. But yeah, it's just a lot of what your comfort level is based on getting out there and shooting and practicing. Um, you know, if you're able to hit clays and everything at further distances than 30 out, over 30 yards, it doesn't take a whole lot to knock a dove down. Uh, so say it's
Awesome.
a lot of personal preference and comfort level with that. So
Awesome. And now when I'm pheasant hunting, I kind of had like the whole time I'm out there, I'm just repeating to myself over and over again, butt, beak, bang. So like as soon as my bead gets in front of that beak, I'm trying to take a shot. With doves, am I going to be going further out? Is it going to be like butt, beak, wait a second, bang as I swing? Because they're just cruising.
Yeah, usually you do find your lead is a little bit more with doves because of the speed they're flying through. So
Okay, good to know. Good to know. Um, we're coming up on 10 till. I've put a couple of resources in the chat for folks. We've got our, our Learn to Hunt Dove page is in the chat. You can click on that link and it's going to go over, a lot of the stuff that Mark talked about here today, the gear that you're going to need, how to find a place to go, what you need to use, what you need to be aware of. We also have our Mourning Dove game management page, and that goes over stuff as well in terms of what you need to hunt it, the licenses and stuff that you need, and some of the other rules and regs E side of it. And then I also posted in, there was a question that came in on the Q&A, and I want to make sure I address it, about our walk-in access program. There's both a printed and an online atlas that talks about our walk-in access program. There's a link for that in the chat. I posted that. Make sure you click it. Make sure you know where you're at when you go out. So our Recreation Compass has walk-in access lands that are digitally available. There are other third-party apps that are out there that show our walk-in access, but I would make sure you confirm that with the atlas that we publish every year, because every year we're changing some of those properties. So to make sure that you're using the most current information available, please make sure you confirm it with the current atlas that shows where these properties are and gives you directions to them. And those properties should be marked. There should be signage that says this is walk-in access, so that and it usually says who the walk-in access is provided by. So it's a really well maintained program. If you're not sure you're on walk-in access, if you can't see any of the signs, if it doesn't look quite like what's in the atlas, back out and go to a different spot, because it's not risk being in the wrong place to go do this stuff. So please be respectful, and remember the walk-in access stuff. This is private lands. These are private property that people have allowed hunting and other activities to occur on. Please be respectful. Police your trash. Pick up your stuff. Like Mark said, pick up your shells. Pick up any snack wrappers or stuff that gets on the ground while you're sitting there. And just be very respectful of those properties, because if we don't treat them with respect, they're not going to be available for us to use in the future. So please be aware of that. Okay, I'm not seeing any more questions in the Q&A or in the chat. So Mark, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us about dove hunting and sharing your experiences. This is something that I think is really cool, because similar to turkey hunting, but even more so, a lot of folks in Minnesota didn't get to grow up doing this stuff because there just wasn't a season. And so it's an opportunity that's out there. It's a great chance to get out and dust off the cobwebs from wing shooting before pheasant and waterfowl starts up, and it can be a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun to get out there.
thanks for the opportunity, James. Really appreciate it. So.
Absolutely. Thanks everybody. Don't forget that next week we're going to be talking from the Minnesota State Fair, technology provided. And we're going to be talking about what the DNR does at the State Fair. And then our fall series is kicking off. We're going to be starting that up again, and we got a lot of great stuff coming up this fall. So please stay tuned. Please stay with us. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We really appreciate it. Y'all get out, have a blast, be safe, and it's a great time to get outside. So thanks so much, and thank you everybody.